Well, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well today. So today we begin a new chapter looking at the endocrine system. The endocrine system consists of a series of glands located throughout the body that release hormones and stimulate the body to respond in certain ways. So we follow up the nervous system stuff we do with endocrine system in a way to sort of compare how those two operate. The nervous system is a relatively fast acting response system. So your body can respond within milliseconds by making these neurons carry electrical signals to muscles and glands throughout the body. Now, that said, while the response is very quick, it tends to be shorter duration. Think about, playing an instrument and the muscles in your hand contracting. Additionally, the path of the signal follows a prescribed route. You have neurons that connect your brain to other parts of your body, and then you have these dedicated pathways where these electrical signals travel basically along these wires, and then you go to specific target tissues like, again, muscles or glands, and the body can respond. Now, this operates in contrast to the endocrine system. The endocrine system does allow the body to respond, but it does so in a different way. Now, this does tend to be a slower acting response. It can take longer periods of time, seconds to minutes to days, to have things start to change inside of cells. But the effect tends to be longer lasting. So I think of it this way. If you see a bear, your nervous system could allow you to run away, even though you're not supposed to run. So you can run and get away, but then after you're away from the bear, you might stop running, but your body is still going to be pumped up or amped up, and that's because the hormonal signaling is still occurring. So your muscles may have stopped contracting and your nervous system stopped responding, but because your body is still experiencing that fight or flight phenomenon, then that's an indication that your endocrine system is still up and running. Additionally, the path of the signal is different. Your endocrine system actually uses your bloodstream as a pathway for the signal. Glands release hormones into your bloodstream, and then you've got 60,000 miles of blood vessels. You can carry that signal to tissues all around the body. All right. So the organs of the endocrine system are these glands. It's basically brain to groin, and we have a series of glands. Additionally, some other organs around the body can also produce hormones. Now, hormones, again, think of them as a chemical signal. Here, I like this image quite a bit. You see the secreting cell. That could be the glandular tissue. It releases the hormones. In this case, it's represented by the little blue dots. They travel through your bloodstream, and then they dock on receptors on target cells. Now, you've got all sorts of hormones traveling through your body. How do the right signals get to the right cells? Well, the key is the receptors, right? You have to have the receptors for a particular message. If you don't have the receptors, then you don't get the message. So there could be plant hormones that affect plant growth, but they're not going to impact your own growth because our cells don't have the receptors for plant hormones. Okay, so it's a two-part communication. You have the secreting cell, and then you have the target cell. The secreting cell has to successfully produce the hormone, and then the target cell has to have the receptor to get the message. So again, you can have hormones traveling all over your body, but certain hormones only affect certain tissues because those target tissues have the receptors for the particular hormone. All right, so what do hormones even do? Well, depending on the hormone, it could have all sorts of different effects. One, it could change membrane permeability, so it could make certain substances more or less easily pass through membranes to get inside of cells and affect what cells do. Another huge impact of hormones is basically by switching machinery on and off, right? Enzymes are the catalysts that speed up chemical reactions within cells, so you can actually activate or deactivate certain enzymes with hormonal signals. Genes are instructions for making proteins. Again, proteins do the work of cells, so hormones could be critical to basically switching on protein production or switching off protein production and allowing the body to respond in certain ways. Certain hormones can stimulate cell division, so think of like growth hormones. And then one thing that's sort of interesting about this communication system is that one thing that hormones can often do is cause the release of other hormones. So it sort of relays the signal on, and we'll look at some examples of that later on in this chapter. All right, there are two broad categories of hormones. We have amino acid-based hormones and then steroid-based or lipid-based hormones. Amino acid-based hormones are polar, And as such, since they're polar, they can't squeeze between the phospholipid bilayer in the membrane. So what that means is these hormones have to be detected on the receptors at the surface of the cell. So here we see epinephrine, which is the same thing as adrenaline. It will dock on a receptor on the surface of the cell, and then it uses what's called the second messenger system to relay the signal inside the cell and allow the cell to respond. In this case, it's going to prevent the production of glycogen, which is like a storage sugar, and stimulate enzymes that are used to cut up or break down glycogen so you can release sugar and use that to power ATP to production and the body can respond. So again, these polar hormones, these amino acid based hormones, dock on receptors on the surface of the cell. It relays a message inside the cell, and you basically switch on or off different enzymes to allow the cells to respond. Now, to stop this signal, the only thing you have to do, remove the signal or remove the hormone from the receptor. If you do that, signal stops. So these tend to be sort of shorter duration hormonal responses. Now, steroid hormones are nonpolar. Because they're nonpolar, they can squeeze between the nonpolar part of a cell membrane or a nuclear membrane. So these steroid hormones can actually get inside of cells and actually get all the way into the nucleus. And what they'll do is actually switch genes on or off. So if you switch genes on or off, again, that alters protein production, and then that can cause significant and even permanent changes in the organism. Think about how sex hormones can stimulate the production of secondary sex characteristics of males and females. You can cause permanent changes to the body by switching different genes on or off. And again, these signals can do that because they're nonpolar. Because these steroid hormones are nonpolar, they can get inside the cell and actually get all the way into the nucleus and switch genes on or off. So those can cause much longer term changes for the organism. All right, so how do we regulate hormone levels in the body? Typically, it's through negative feedback. Remember, negative feedback is good because negative feedback brings you back to homeostasis. What negative feedback does is it basically shuts down earlier steps in the process so you don't overproduce something. So here we can look at this example. Again, we'll get into the particulars of this in activities later in the week. But the stimulus could be the drop in temperature of the body. You get cold. Your brain detects that, sends a signal to a gland, which sends a signal to another gland, which causes you to release this thyroxine hormone, which will rev up your metabolism and warm the body. But the thing is, the end product, thyroxine, this hormone, will actually inhibit glandular tissue early on from producing their hormones or releasing their hormones. And that way, when you produce something, it will actually inhibit its own production so you don't overproduce. All right, so here is a specific example you'll need to know for the test. It's how to regulate blood sugar. So the way I remember this, to just think you got to keep it at 100, right? So your blood sugar, you got to keep it at 100 milligrams per deciliter. Just remember, keep it at 100 and you're good. So what happens if you have breakfast or lunch or whatever the case may be? Well, your blood sugar is going to rise, right? So then that serves as a stimulus to tell your pancreas to release a hormone called insulin. What insulin does is it causes cells to take in sugar, and it causes your liver to store sugar as glycogen. If you take sugar into cells or you store sugar as glycogen, well, then your blood sugar will drop and you'll go back down to 100. So let's sort of imagine here. You have high blood sugar, you just ate a meal. So then your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin will cause sugar to go into cells or into the liver. And when that happens, it will lower your blood sugar. Okay. If you lower your blood sugar, well, then insulin secretion will decrease. And again, you go back to your set point. Well, let's look on the flip side of this. What happens if you haven't eaten in a long time or you've been exercising? Well, what will happen is your blood sugar will drop below 100, right? It goes below the set point. So then that stimulates your pancreas to release a different hormone. It's called glucagon. Glucagon will activate enzymes that cause glycogen, that storage sugar, to get cut up, and then you can release glucose back into your bloodstream. And then your blood sugar goes back up to 100, and then glucagon production drops. So let's look at this scenario. Here, blood sugar is low. Again, you haven't eaten in a while or you've been running, whatever the case may be. The pancreas releases glucagon. Glucagon stimulates the breakdown of glycogen. If you break down glycogen, glucose is released in the bloodstream and blood sugar goes up. So definitely make sure you know how your body responds if your blood sugar is low or high. All right, so what can serve as a stimulus for these glands to release hormones? Again, a common signal is other hormones. Again, if your body temperature drops, the hypothalamus can release a hormone that causes the pituitary to release another hormone, which causes the thyroid gland to release a third hormone. So, yeah, hormones can stimulate the release of hormones in a lot of different ways. Humoral changes. The humors are the fluids of the body. So if your blood becomes more concentrated, whether you've been eating salty foods or sugary foods, if the solute concentration in your blood goes up, that can stimulate hormones that cause the thirst response. It can also cause the release of a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, which causes your body, your kidneys, to reabsorb more water. So you have more water in your blood, and so the concentration of solute goes down. Neural stimulus, this happens when certain neurons actually stimulate glands to release hormones. This is usually hooked up to like your adrenal glands, what they show in the middle here. These sit on top of your kidneys and they'll release adrenaline. So you can see the bear. You take in that stimulus, that sends a signal right to your adrenal glands. Holy smokes, you better release that adrenaline. We need sugar. We need to redirect blood because there's a bear we got to deal with. All right, now let's look at other organs that can produce hormones. Okay, so again, glands will produce hormones, but then other organs also have tissues that allow them to produce hormones. Here, the interior lining of blood vessels can release a molecule called a prostaglandin. Okay, what these can do is stimulate different tissues to respond in different ways. Again, they can make blood vessels constrict or narrow. It can also alter the diameter of airways in the lungs. Both your blood vessels and your lungs are lined with smooth muscles. So if you release these hormones, you can make the muscles contract, and then that can make those organs contract. Same way with uterine contractions. Again, the uterus is lined with smooth muscle, so you can stimulate contractions with those tissues. Gastrin, this is an interesting one. When you eat breakfast or lunch or dinner, whatever the case may be, and you put food in your stomach, that can stimulate cells to release this hormone called gastrin. Now, gastrin serves as a signal that causes the release of hydrochloric acid, and hydrochloric acid cuts up a protein and basically activates an enzyme that helps you digest proteins from your food. So when you eat, that serves as a stimulus for the release of a hormone that basically alters the pH of your stomach to activate enzymes so that you can digest your food. Here, more hormones related to digestion. The duodenum, that's just the first section of your small intestine here. So you've had, breakfast or lunch, you've got food in your stomach, and then you need to basically move some of that material from your stomach into your small intestine. So again, the duodenum is this first section of your small intestine, sort of a C shape that we see here. So there is a sphincter here between the stomach and the small intestine, and there's a hormone called cholecystokinin, or you just call it CCK, that causes this sphincter to relax momentarily. So some of the contents from the stomach can leak into the duodenum or your small intestine. Now that's good because some of the nutrients that you've consumed can be passed on to your intestines so they can be further broken down and absorbed. So cholecystokinin helps with that. But another problem we run into is, and that stuff from your stomach is super acidic. So how do you neutralize it? Well, we've got a hormone for that. Secretin is a hormone that causes the release of a bicarb solution into the duodenum. So when some of the contents of your stomach get dumped into your small intestine here, a hormone causes the release of bicarb, and that neutralizes the acid coming out of your stomach. So again, a couple of important hormones sort of regulate the movement of materials into your intestine, and then the neutralization of the acid coming from your stomach. Erythropoietin, this is an interesting one. If you are hypoxic, if you have low blood oxygen levels, then your body can respond by having your kidneys produce this hormone erythropoietin. What erythropoietin does is stimulate red blood cell production. So again, if you spend time at elevation, we have Olympic training facilities in Colorado Springs. So if people spend time up at high elevation, they'll be hypoxic. Their body will respond by producing erythropoietin, and then they'll ultimately produce more red blood cells. So we do that as part of the Olympic training for athletes, so that they have more red blood cells, and it gives them a competitive advantage because they can carry more oxygen and deliver more oxygen, make more ATP. Now, synthetic erythropoietin is what Lance Armstrong and other bicyclists have used in the Tour de France. So they use a drug that sort of mimics the shape of this hormone, and they produce more red blood cells and basically cheat to win. Let's see, vitamin D. Vitamin D is an important part of bone health because what it can do is aid the reuptake or aid the uptake of calcium ions from the intestine into the bloodstream. So, if you are consuming calcium in order to try and help strengthen bones, you also want to consume vitamin D because the vitamin D helps your body absorb that calcium. All right, leptin. Leptin is a hormone that will decrease a person's appetite. So we'll do a case study that looks at ghrelin, a hormone that makes someone feel hungry, and then leptin makes someone feel satiated or full. So again, these two hormones can sort of influence appetite in people. And we finish with a couple of other interesting ones. Relaxin sounds like a great hormone to me. But what relaxin will do is alter the protein structure and ligaments in the pelvis. We know that the pelvic inlet and the pelvic outlet is a pathway for the baby during childbirth. So what happens during pregnancy is relaxin causes a rearrangement of these proteins so that it makes the pelvis a little more flexible, so that it makes it easier to push the baby out. So, major reorganization of the body during pregnancy. And finally, another hormone related to pregnancy, human chorionic gonadotropin, or just HCG. This is a hormone that helps maintain the uterine lining so that there's, basically blood vessel connection between the mom and the developing embryo and fetus. And so initially, the embryo will release HCG to help maintain the lining of the uterus so that the pregnancy can be maintained. And then eventually, tissues in the uterus and in the placenta will produce the HCG to maintain the pregnancy. But because so much of this hormone is being produced, it will actually spill into the into the bodily fluids. So you get it in the blood and then eventually in the urine. And then that's what a pregnancy test is based on. It's the presence of this HCG hormone, which again is usually produced by the embryo. So that's telling you that pregnancy has occurred because the embryo and eventually other tissues will crank out that hormone. All right, so that is that. As you move through stuff, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great day.